I knew something was off the second I saw the bolt cutters sitting on my driveway next to a snapped padlock. It was a quiet Thursday morning, and I was halfway through my first cup of coffee when I saw the gate to my side yard wide open. That gate had stayed locked since I bought the place 5 years ago. It wasn't decorative, it kept people off the private gravel path that led to my workshop. The same workshop the HOA had tried to claim was unsightly about 3 months back. I stepped outside, still in flannel pajama pants and a t-shirt, and spotted her. Dolores Langley. Middle-aged, bleach blonde bob, chunky sunglasses, clipboard glued to her hand like it was surgically attached. She was standing on my side yard, pointing at something with another woman from the HOA board. Probably one of her lackeys. "Dolores," I called across the yard. "What the hell are you doing on my property?" She turned like I'd just insulted her purse. "Mr. Camden Brooks," she said, voice already at full Karen pitch. "This gate violates HOA standards. Section 5, Paragraph 2 gates must remain unlocked for emergency access." "That's city property code, Dolores," I said, stepping fully out now. "Not HOA, and this isn't common area, this is my land. I hold the deed to this strip." She crossed her arms like I'd just challenged her to a duel. "We've had complaints. Multiple residents say this gate makes the neighborhood feel imprisoned. I'm here to address it. You used bolt cutters on my lock. It was obstructing HOA access." I had every right. I walked over, picked up the broken lock, and held it up. "You do realize this is breaking and entering, right?" She laughed, a high-pitched fake giggle that made my skin crawl. "Oh, please, call the police. I'd love to explain how you've been violating code for months." I don't think she expected me to actually pull my phone out and dial, but I did. Right there, no hesitation, she tried to wave it off. "Oh, don't be dramatic. I was going to leave a notice on your door, but figured we'd be efficient." I ignored her and gave dispatch my address. Told them there had been unauthorized access and property damage. Dolores's smile started to twitch. "You're really calling the cops over a gate?" she asked, suddenly not so sure of herself. "No, I'm calling them because you trespassed and destroyed my property. And because I'm tired of you thinking the HOA gives you a badge and a crown." Her assistant tried to pull her back toward the sidewalk, but she stood her ground like a statue made of smug. 5 minutes later, a patrol car rolled up. The officer was a guy named Ramirez. I'd seen him around. Nice guy, always professional. His eyes immediately landed on the bolt cutters still sitting in the grass. "Can someone explain what's going on here?" he asked. Dolores stepped forward like she was auditioning for a courtroom drama. "Officer, I'm with the HOA. We had to remove a locked gate that was violating community guidelines." Officer Ramirez looked at me. "You own this property?" "Every inch," I said, and held up my folder. "Including that side yard. I've got the deed right here." He took it, scanned it, then looked back at Dolores. "Ma'am, this isn't HOA jurisdiction. You entered private property and cut a lock. That's criminal trespass and destruction of property." Dolores blinked. No, this is all a misunderstanding. We have standing, you don't," I cut in. "This has been settled. I bought this house after the last owner redrew the boundary lines. The HOA never updated their maps because it didn't suit their power trip." Ramirez looked back at Dolores. "I'm going to need you to stay right here while I make a call." She tried to talk over him, but he held up a hand. I walked back to my porch, sat down, and sipped my coffee for once. It tasted perfect. Officer Ramirez stood between the squad car and Dolores, speaking quietly into his radio while she shifted her weight like the sidewalk was suddenly too hot for her designer sandals. Her assistant, a wiry woman with a tight bun and a nervous twitch in her jaw, kept glancing at the gate like it might reassemble itself if she stared hard enough. I stayed on the porch, letting the weight of silence do its work. The truth didn't need a spotlight, it just needed to stand still while the lies fell apart. After a few minutes, another car pulled up. This one was unmarked. A man in slacks and a collared shirt stepped out, flashing a badge as he approached. Ramirez nodded and waved him over. "Detective Langston," he introduced, then gestured toward Dolores. "This is the HOA president. She entered Mr. Brooks's property and cut a lock without consent." Langston turned to me. "You got documents proving ownership of the area in question." I handed him the folder. "Everything's there." Boundary survey title, "The zoning adjustment filed in 2019. He flipped through it, eyes scanning quickly. "Looks airtight. You got security footage?" I pointed to the side of the house. "Camera above the workshop caught the whole thing." "Audio too." Dolores's voice cut in, louder than necessary. "This is absurd. We were responding to community concerns. The HOA board has authority over visual uniformity and neighborhood cohesion." Langston didn't even pretend to entertain it. "You're not code enforcement. You're a private organization. This isn't a common area and you're not exempt from the law." Her face paled a shade, but she stayed standing like she thought posture alone would save her. Langston turned back to Ramirez. "Let's get statements. And secure the footage." I led them through the house to my office. The monitor showed a clear shot of Dolores cutting the lock, stepping through the gate, and pointing out areas to her assistant like she was on a real estate tour. Her voice was crisp and clear, even the part where she said, "We'll just say it was unlatched." Langston leaned closer. "That's going to be a problem for her." Ramirez nodded. "She knew it wasn't legal." As they transferred the footage, Langston asked, "You ever had issues with her before?" I leaned against the doorframe. "She's been trying to picket this property for months. Claimed I was storing industrial equipment because of my tool shed. Last week, she sent me a notice about excessive gravel." He raised an eyebrow. "That's not even a thing. She makes them up. She's been trying to push a vote to reclassify my lot as non-conforming, probably to get me fined out or forced to sell." Langston exhaled through his nose. "Sounds like harassment with a side of criminal mischief." Back outside, Dolores was pacing now, arms folded. When Langston returned, he didn't waste time. "We're going to have to take a formal statement down at the station. You'll be notified if charges proceed, which given the footage they likely will." She looked like someone had just told her the world was flat and she had to walk across it barefoot. "You can't be serious." Langston didn't blink. "Trespassing, vandalism, possibly attempted fraud, depending on what she's been filing under the HOA's name." That shut her up. As they escorted her to the unmarked car, her assistant began quietly backing away, muttering something about needing to make a phone call. Ramirez stopped her. "We'll need your statement too." She froze. By the time the cars pulled away, the street was lined with curious neighbors peeking from behind curtains or standing on porches. Word was spreading fast, and I didn't mind one bit. Later that afternoon, I received an email from a board member named Curtis, who'd always seemed like he was just along for the ride. He asked if we could talk. We met at the community gazebo, just far enough from the clubhouse that no one could eavesdrop. Curtis looked tired. "Listen, I didn't know she was gonna do that. She didn't even call a board vote." I folded my arms. "How many complaints has she fabricated?" He hesitated. "Enough. She writes them herself sometimes, says they're anonymous. Then she uses them to justify citations. And you let her. She's got the majority vote. She bullies the rest of us into silence." "Not anymore," I said. He looked up. "What do you mean?" "I've already contacted the city's compliance office. They're reviewing the HOA's filings. If she's been submitting false violation reports or altering documents, they'll find it. And if the board doesn't remove her voluntarily, I'll file a petition to dissolve the HOA entirely." Curtis's eyes widened. "You can do that, if I get enough signatures and prove misconduct." "Yes." He looked around the empty gazebo, then took a deep breath. "You'll have them. People are tired of her reign." That night I printed up flyers, not the passive kind either. These were bold with clear language and a call to action. I included a QR code linking to a petition site and a breakdown of the HOA's misconduct citing specific bylaws, violations, and the pending investigation. By morning, the flyers were on every door in the neighborhood. 2 days later, I held the first community meeting in my front yard. I didn't expect more than a handful, but over 30 people showed up. Some brought folding chairs. Others brought stories about fines for lawn color, threats over holiday decorations, even one guy who'd been cited for having a bumper sticker the board didn't like. I stood on the porch and let them speak. Every word added weight to the case we were building. By the end of the week, I had over 70 signatures. The next Monday, I filed a formal complaint with the county. The petition to remove the current HOA board was attached, along with statements, footage, and a notarized summary of the gate incident. Curtis emailed again. This time, he said he was resigning from the board and encouraged others to do the same. The house felt quieter after that. Not because things were over, but because something had shifted. Like the neighborhood had taken a deep breath for the first time in years. 3 days later, I got a letter from the county. They were opening a formal audit of the HOA's operations for the past 5 years. I framed it. By Friday, the neighborhood was buzzing with a kind of cautious energy, the kind that comes when people realize the stronghold they've lived under might finally be cracking. I'd spent the morning at City Hall, delivering a supplemental packet of evidence to the county investigator, a woman named Reena Patel, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, who took one look at the surveillance screenshots and said, "Yep. This is going to get messy." When I got back, I found a folded envelope wedged between the slats of my mailbox. No stamp, no return address, just my name in blocky, aggressive handwriting. Inside was a single page typed in large font: "Cease and desist your campaign against the HOA. You are disrupting order and stability. Further actions will be met with appropriate consequences." No signature, but I didn't need one. Dolores always thought intimidation worked better when it was anonymous. That faux professionalism, the impersonal tone, classic HOA power play, but clumsy. She'd gotten used to no one pushing back. I took the letter straight to Detective Langston, who was already knee-deep in reviewing the HOA's financial records. A court order had been granted the previous day for a forensic audit after the city attorney found sufficient irregularities in their annual reporting. Apparently, Dolores had been moving funds between the general maintenance budget and a vague beautification initiative account that didn't seem to have any receipts attached. Langston read the letter and set it down beside a stack of printed emails they'd pulled from the HOA's internal logins. "She's escalating," he said. "We already had suspicion of fraudulent citations and property interference. Now we've got threats. That's enough to justify a protective order if you want one." I shook my head. "Not yet, let her keep digging." "I want her to feel like she's still in control," he nodded with the faintest trace of amusement. "Just don't wait too long. People like her don't know when to stop." That afternoon, I got a call from Jenna, a nurse who lived 2 blocks over. She was the one who'd been fined last Christmas for excessive lighting because she'd strung blue lights across her roofline. She sounded nervous. "She showed up at my door," Jenna said. "Dolores." Said my name was on a list of agitators. She told me I was in violation of lawn maintenance standards and had 72 hours to comply or face a lien. I asked if she had anything in writing. She handed me a form, but it wasn't from the usual portal. It looked off. I told her to bring it over. When she arrived, I saw what she meant. The letterhead was crooked and the fine print at the bottom listed a completely different P.O. box than the usual HOA correspondence. I scanned it and sent it to Reena Patel. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. "This is bigger than we thought," Reena said. "The P.O. box on that notice isn't registered under the HOA. It's registered to a private LLC called Langley Community Solutions. The treasurer's name, Dolores Langley." I let that sit for a moment. "So she's been issuing fake citations and collecting the fines personally?" "Looks that way." "If we can confirm that more residents paid into that account, we're looking at wire fraud, mail fraud, and likely embezzlement." "How soon can you act on that?" "There's already a judge reviewing the records. If the evidence matches the financials we're digging up, she'll be arrested before the week's out." By Saturday morning, I'd printed out copies of the fake citation. Jenna had received and attached a brief notice explaining the situation, no speculation. Just the facts and instructions for how to report similar experiences directly to the city investigator's office. I walked the neighborhood in the early light, slipping one into every mailbox. By noon, my phone didn't stop ringing. I heard from a retired trucker named Vince who said he'd paid a $200 weed overgrowth fine last month. A single mom named Clarissa said she'd been charged for exterior disharmony because her kid's bike was left out overnight. Both had receipts, and both showed payments made to the same Langley Community Solutions P.O. box. I forwarded everything. By Sunday, the neighborhood message board was on fire. People were trading HOA horror stories like old war tales, but this time with purpose. Every post added to the growing file Rena was compiling. By the end of the day, she confirmed that over 30 residents had paid fines to the fake account. The total, just over $21,000. That night, Curtis messaged me again. He'd been contacted by Rena for a formal deposition. She showed me the LLC paperwork, he said. None of us on the board knew she set that up. She told us all the new citation system was part of a trial reform program, said it was approved by the city. Did you ever see the city's approval? No, she said it was confidential. She lied, I said. To all of you, he paused. I think she has copies of our signatures on blank forms. If she submitted forged reports using our names. She's not just going down alone, I finished for him. Monday morning, 3 unmarked cars rolled into the neighborhood just after 9. I was standing in my driveway when they pulled up. Rena stepped out first, flanked by 2 plainclothes officers. They approached Dolores's house, calm and methodical, while a small crowd began to gather in the street. Dolores opened the door still wearing her silk robe, holding a mug that said, "Boss Lady." The moment she saw Rena, her entire posture changed. Her spine stiffened, chin lifted like she was about to run a board meeting. "You have no authority to be here," she said. Rena handed her a warrant. "We do now." They stepped inside. The next hour was surreal. Neighbors stood in small groups on sidewalks, whispering and watching as boxes were carried out, file folders, hard drives, even a desktop PC. Eventually, Dolores was escorted out in handcuffs. She didn't speak. She didn't look at anyone. She just stared straight ahead, face frozen in disbelief. The officers placed her in the back of the car and drove off without ceremony. Curtis arrived 10 minutes later with a manila envelope. Inside were signed resignations from 3 other board members. "We're done," he said. "No one wants to be part of this mess," I nodded. "We'll hold a new election, real one this time, transparent, community-led." He looked relieved. "You're running, right?" I paused. "No, but I'll help write the new bylaws." That night the street was quieter than usual, no HOA patrols. No condescending emails, just neighbors talking to each other, some for the first time since they'd moved in. I sat on my porch, watching kids ride their bikes down the middle of the road without anyone rushing out to scold them. A week later, the county issued a formal notice. The HOA was suspended pending reorganization. The Langley Community Solutions account was frozen. Charges against Dolores included wire fraud, mail fraud, falsifying public documents, and criminal trespass. They estimated the full scope of the fraud exceeded $40,000 once interest and penalties were factored in. I never got a formal apology, and I didn't need one. The padlock she cut. I mounted it on a plaque and hung it in my workshop, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. Some gates don't need to be opened. Some people need to be stopped. And sometimes, the only way to deal with a fake queen is to remind her the kingdom was never hers to begin with. 3 weeks after Dolores's arrest, the neighborhood was finally breathing like it had just survived a hurricane. The air was different. People didn't cross the street to avoid each other anymore. Lawns looked less like military-grade parade grounds and more like lived-in yards. And the phrase Langley HOA had quietly vanished from every mailbox, email, and bulletin board in the subdivision. But the storm hadn't passed entirely. It was the second Tuesday of the month when I got the subpoena. I was eating leftover chili in my garage with the roll-up door open when a courier handed me a sealed envelope from the district attorney's office. Inside were court dates, an evidence schedule, and a witness list. My name was third behind Jenna and the city's lead financial analyst. The charges against Dolores had expanded barely a month into the investigation, and the DA had added conspiracy to commit fraud and misappropriation of over $50,000 in community funds. I'd expected a plea bargain. Dolores had the kind of ego that usually collapsed when it faced real consequences. But she wasn't folding. She'd hired a high-priced defense attorney from downtown who specialized in municipal overreach cases. Apparently, her plan was to spin herself as a misunderstood reformer caught in bureaucratic red tape. I wasn't worried. The facts were concrete and the paper trail was a mile long. But I wasn't about to walk into court unprepared. That night, I called Arnie. He was a retired civil attorney who lived 3 houses down from the park. We'd only spoken once before he'd shown up at the community meeting wearing a faded "Don't Tread on Me" hat and carrying 3 thick binders labeled Langley violations. I hadn't realized just how deep his records went. Arnie answered on the second ring. "You've got a trial date," he asked before I could say anything. "Just got the paperwork. You'll want to go through the HOA charter with a fine-tooth comb. There are 2 amendments from 2018 she never registered with the city. That alone voids every citation that came after them. Why weren't they registered? Because they were voted in at a closed-door meeting, no quorum, no notice. No minutes. She forged the vote. She didn't bother holding one." The next morning, Arnie came by with a flash drive and a yellow legal pad filled with notes. He'd highlighted key dates, scanned in every budget discrepancy he'd tracked, and even included 2 affidavits from former board members who had moved out and were willing to testify. While sorting through the files, I came across something that made my stomach turn. A scanned permit application for a fencing project dated 6 weeks before Dolores had cut my padlock. It wasn't for her property. It was for mine. She'd submitted it under my address, forged my signature, and listed the contractor as Langley Community Improvements, LLC. The plan was to install a gate across my side yard and integrate it into the community access corridor. If I hadn't stopped her when I did, she would have had a crew on my land with paperwork to back her up. I called Reena Patel immediately. "That document changes things," she said. "That's not just fraud. That's attempted acquisition of private property through forgery. I'll notify the DA." By the following week, the trial date had been moved up. The prosecution wanted it on record before the next budget cycle, while the evidence was still fresh and the damage to the community remained visible. Court convened on a Monday morning in a small, wood-paneled building just outside the county seat. The gallery was packed. At least 30 neighbors showed up, some in work uniforms, others in business attire, all of them with the same quiet determination. There was no shouting, no signs, just presence. When Dolores entered, she looked like a different person. Her platinum bob was pulled tight into a bun, her clothes were plain gray slacks and a white blouse, and she carried no clipboard. No sunglasses. No mask of suburban control, just a woman about to be buried by her own arrogance. Her attorney tried to suppress the evidence about the forged citations, arguing that the HOA had implied discretionary power and that any irregularities were clerical misunderstandings. The judge didn't buy it. Jenna testified first. She described how Dolores showed up at her door with a citation that didn't match the HOA's standard formatting and threatened her with a lien. She pointed out the mismatched mailbox address and the incorrect account number. Then came Vince, who confirmed that he'd paid a fine to Langley Community Solutions believing it was an official subdivision account, only to later realize that no such entity was listed in the city's records. When it was my turn, I brought the flash drive, the forged permit, and the camera footage. I walked the jury through the timeline how I found the bolt cutters, how she justified her actions by citing imaginary guidelines, and how she'd submitted paperwork pretending to be me. Her defense tried to discredit the footage, saying it lacked context, but they couldn't explain away the audio, especially not the part where Dolores clearly said, "We'll just say it was unlatched." The final nail came from Reena Patel, who detailed the financial audit. She broke down each transaction Dolores had rerouted into the fake LLC, how she'd used HOA funds to pay for landscaping on her own property, and how she'd filed reimbursement claims for community events that never occurred. The moment Reena mentioned the luxury spa invoice billed as a bored retreat, one of the jurors actually muttered something under their breath. The trial lasted 3 days. The deliberation took 2 hours, guilty on all counts. The judge didn't waste time. Sentencing was scheduled for the following week. Dolores was remanded into custody immediately. As she was led away, she didn't look at me. She didn't look at anyone. For the first time since this whole mess began, she looked small, not humbled, just defeated. That night, the neighborhood held a cookout in the cul-de-sac behind the park. No speeches, no banners, just grills, folding chairs, music, and for the first time in a long while, laughter that didn't carry a trace of tension. Curtis showed up with his daughter and handed me a manila envelope. Inside were the final revisions to the new bylaws drafted by a volunteer committee and reviewed by the city clerk. They eliminated the power to fine without clear municipal backing, prohibited board members from holding contractor relationships with the HOA, and required open voting on all major decisions. Curtis raised his soda can. To no more fake fines. I raised mine back. To gates that stay locked unless we say otherwise. The next morning, I removed what was left of the old gate and replaced it with a custom one I built in my workshop. Oak panels, steel reinforcements, a keypad lock I programmed myself, not because I was afraid anyone would try again, but because I'd earned the right to protect what was mine, and now the neighborhood had earned that right too. Justice didn't come quickly. It didn't come easily, but it came loud enough to echo through every inch of Dolores Langley's empty rulebook, and we never let anyone forget it.